AI art seems to be everywhere, and there are lots of people, especially in the creative space, that have very strong feelings about it. And I get it. It feels like the lack of effort makes the work a lot less meaningful. And on top of all that, most AI models seem to be trained on at least some amount of stolen images. But I would like to examine why exactly AI art feels so cheap and uninspired, and where the problem actually lays. Is it how it is being used? Is it that we have to get used to it in some way? Or is it the technology in and of itself? I do understand it's a pretty messy situation right now, but I think there's potential to reclaim this technology and use it in a way that actually makes sense. So let's try to understand how we feel from a viewer's perspective and what we can learn from the creator side as well, so that we don't become whatever this is. One of the reasons I'm making this video is because I had a pretty strong reaction towards an art piece myself. I found an interesting looking image on a pixel sorting subreddit. It is called Green Girl, and in the process of trying to figure out how it was made, it became kind of clear that it actually was probably a Midjourney image, which surprisingly made me feel like I've been betrayed or like misled somehow. It just felt like it made it less meaningful in some way. But that got me thinking about what I actually value in an art piece. What do I actually look for? And it seemed like what I value is the human element. And I didn't think that an AI art piece actually had that element. And that's why I felt so weird about it. And that is one of the most interesting things about AI development, I think, is that it makes us take a look at fields that were inherently human in the past and gives us the opportunity to take a look at what we actually value in them. Like, for example, music, writing, and art. And when we figure that out, I think it's actually easier to find a way how generative AI might fit into creative work. And we'll get to that in a bit. Aside from the AI of it all, there's also the problem with cheap and commercial art, which I would argue wasn't great before AI, and now it's just easier to make a lot of. So AI content farms are already happening, and there's a bunch of people who are trying to convince you that you can make a lot of money with AI content. And if you ask me, those are just like the same finance bros that try to sell you the next big thing, whatever that is at the moment. The annoying thing is that these kinds of operations are going to output a huge volume of content. And that either means platforms are going to get flooded with what feels like weirdly generic and boring shitposting, or platforms have to figure out a way to sift out the good from the bad, which also was a problem that existed before and now kind of got worse with AI. But I think as viewers, we have to figure out what matters to us right now. And that's not something I can pretend is even remotely universal, but I can offer my thinking. And to me, it seems that the artist's intention and expression is something I want to feel communicated in art. But I also recognize now that I can have a meaningful connection no matter what the artist's intention actually was. It is like most communication. It goes two ways. And on both ends, there's just a bunch of stuff happening. Which is just a complicated way of saying I still like Green Girl, and I think that is fine. Because my interpretation and my experience makes it worth it. And for that, it doesn't really matter how it was made. But the creative process, of course, is immensely important and often has an impact on the viewers. So what are the ways that generative AI could play a part in that? To figure that out, I would like to take a quick look at how it works, because this helps us understand what it's good at and what it's bad at. As you all probably know, AI image generators work by inputting text and outputting an image, which means there's a model that knows which image features relate to what words. And you can imagine these models as a multi-dimensional grid, which kind of works as a memory of how image features and concepts are connected. Since if two things are connected in a meaningful way, they will be closer together in this kind of memory. That, of course, is an oversimplification, but it kind of illustrates how these models think in a way. But the really cool thing is you can actually visualize these relationships with something called a large activation atlas, which projects some layers of the model in 2D. And with that, you can kind of see the structure of these models a little bit more clearly. And it's also a little bit of an explanation why, especially earlier models, kind of had some uncanny results where you weren't quite sure what they were trying to depict. Which is just because like these concepts were very close together and it wasn't quite working out what it was trying to actually project. Now that we kind of know what the structure looks like, I think that makes originality an interesting point of contention. We know there's stolen data in these image models, and you can create images with perfect repeatability if you have all the settings available for that, what does it mean for actually wanting to create something new with these tools? But I mean, originality, of course, is difficult in any way, but we have to find a good sweet spot of what type of remixing is good and healthy, actually. But fact is, I can create the exact same image if I have the exact same model, settings, and prompt. And while some may argue that the way these models work is similar to human creativity, I think that misses the point of what a person can bring to the creative process, actually. A musician, for example, has a lot of influences that don't directly relate to the work, but still play a part in the way they create. Of course, there's not a clear answer to what amount of originality makes something art or meaningful, but I think understanding the technology helps us understand what we are comfortable with, actually. All the talk about originality also often reminds me of like copyright law and fair use arguments, where the amount of transformation plays a big role in what constitutes original creation, or like transformation that is okay. And I think that's one way of thinking about these technologies as well. But clearly, I mean, we have a lot of stuff to figure out in copyright as well. So does it help? Maybe, I don't know. But I think it might be helpful to think along those lines for like future guidelines, maybe. The structure of these models is only, I think, part of the problem. The other one is the input method and like the user interface, just how we interact with these models. Because there's, ironically, for a model or a tool that create any image you want, a lot of rigidity in only using text as your input. If you ever wanted a very specific image from a generator, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's difficult to get it exactly right. And prompt engineering can only get you so far. But I think that's the reason why I found most tools that give you the option to input an image as a prompt, additionally to a prompt, a lot more freedom, and they're just a lot more enjoyable to use most of the time. Because since you can dictate the base image any way you like, you have much more control over the final product. So any image generator that only uses text as an input is not much of a creative tool to me, because it restricts my ability to put my intention into what I want to create. And I think that just hurts the creative process more than anything. This stuff is technologically very impressive, but practically, I think, just a lot of the time disappointing. But let's try to apply what we have learned about the way generative AI works and how it is being used to arrive at the sweet spot for creative freedom, but still technological assistance by the AI. What you just saw was my best attempt at creating art with AI, not necessarily AI art, I wouldn't call it that. But it was made as part of my current studies in media technology and uses a mix of techniques that gave me and my team as much control over the generative AI as possible and the end product overall. And of course, has a bunch of extra stuff happening. For the purpose of the exhibition which the project was made for, it was projected onto a 3D printed landscape that is very subtly placed behind me. And you could also change the animation with placing objects onto an NFC scanner and then triggering certain events. But at the heart of it is the animation that was made using an image-to-image process, in which we first made a 3D animation with basic shapes and that kind of define the scene, blocking out the scene, and define the motion of the scene. And then we use Comfy UI to generate style and detail onto that base image, basically. Comfy UI is a tool that is mostly used for open source generative AI models and gives a lot more gradual control over the generation process. And it uses a node-based workflow, so we can customize a lot of steps in the process, which was very important to this project in particular. And while it looks confusing at first, it really helped me get a much more precise result than with any text-to-image generator I could have used. And while my workflow looks complicated, it's actually on the easier side of like Comfy UI workflows, I think, and still gets me, or got me, where I really needed to be with that, for that project at least. And I think we can push generative AI much more in this direction. But the crucial point is that we retain control over the end result of it. The degree of control definitely doesn't have to be the same for everyone, but it makes the use of these tools much more interesting and make sure that the human touch doesn't get lost in the mix, I think. As part of my thought process the last few months, I also made myself some rules. Firstly, to make myself clear what I should do, and secondly, to make my use of generative AI use more transparent. And maybe these rules can also be a jumping off point for other creators as well. And they will all feel kind of familiar if you've watched this video now. But let's take a final look at my takeaways, at my rules, more or less hard rules of my use of generative AI. I came prepared. Rule 1. Human intention can drive a piece enough as to constitute an original creation. I think that's the most important thing to remember. If it carries meaning either for the artist or for the viewer, something valuable is there, and it's better to exist than not exist. And to me that excludes any AI content farm. When the intention is to purely make some money, there's no meaning left for the actual content itself, I think. Rule number 2, I will never impersonate an artist's style to make it my own, maybe to reference or explore it, but never to maliciously exploit or gain from it. That's just called not being a dick. But rules sometimes have to state the obvious. Rule number 3, I will always label generative AI use. Again, I feel that's just like a decent thing to do, especially since a lot of people have very strong feelings about AI, and understandably so. And I think labeling gets more important the more directly you use generative AI in the final product. If you look some stuff up with AI, I don't think that needs a label as part of the process of like researching or something. But if a major part of the final product is generated, that basically necessitates a label. Yeah, it's a spectrum really. I think the closer AI is used to the final product, the more important it becomes to label it. Rule 4 is there are styles and ways to use these tools that are unspecific enough as to not harm any other artist in the process, especially if Rule 1 applies. That rule mostly matters because models are partly made up of stolen content. But I think there are styles in there that are unspecific enough or not specific to a singular group or artist, or old enough or general enough that it doesn't harm anyone in the process, really. That's why I kind of use this oil painting style in my projects a lot, or when I do something generative AI. I feel like the oil painting style is really general and not so specific to any kind of person. Even though it's certainly not a guarantee that you're not reproducing training data as part of the process. But it's a lot fairer, I think, to current artists that have content that is part of these models. It's really just an okay middle ground for recognizing the problem with the training data, but still being able to use an interesting technology at this moment in time. So it's a compromise that like I'm okay with at the moment. Yeah, it's okay. It's a compromise. It's a compromise, and I'm sure that's like up for debate, and people feel differently about that. So, and I get that. Takeaways. So I think my key takeaways are the following. It is important to recognize that the value in art doesn't only come from the process of creating it. And that can vary a lot depending on who you are. But I enjoy some AI images, and I think that's fine. Also, generative AI makes things easier for people who want to make cool stuff, but also for people who want either your money or your attention. And I think we're going to get better in the future at recognizing those things. And I think if platforms want to be sustainable in the long term, they gonna have to play a part in that process, helping people in figuring out what is actually worthwhile and what's not. And last but not least, I think effort makes it worth it. In Bird's Eye, my project, generative AI was used as one part of many. And through the use of different tools and influences, it became one unique thing. And I believe that's the most fruitful way to use AI, as one part of many. Okay. Welcome to the outro that surely will be a perfect length and not too long, because I will restrain myself from talking too much. But I want to touch on some things, and especially give you some context as to who I am, because I think it's really annoying if you see a video and you don't really know where a person is coming from. So that's why this outro is here. But I do want to quickly touch on, like, was I too nice in this video? Because it's not that I don't share a lot of criticism and a lot of concerns around AI, because I do. There's a lot of really like overhype and a lot of bad stuff happening, because just really senseless like use of AI is, I think, the main problem. Because as I said in the video, it's interesting technology, but you kind of have to relax the expectations you have towards AI, because I think there's not a lot of the stuff that kind of is being said that it can do, and like 95% of images that are being generated, I don't think that is really like necessary. There's not a lot of good stuff happening, but I think there's potential to be to make this technology be used in a way that helps creatives or anyone create more and actually meaningful stuff. Anyway, actually, to the context, who am I? As I said in the video, I studied media technology. I have studied communication science before that, which I didn't finish, but still learned a lot, and really kind of shaped how I think about a lot of media stuff and media communication specifically. And that's what this channel is gonna be about. Experience in media and why it's so important, and I think how it affects us, and I want to talk more about that stuff. Also, I really want to have this channel be not only about creating stuff, not only about creating media, but also how you experience media and what does that do. So like shining a light on both sides of the coin, so to speak, because I think both sides are so important to like everything we do at this point, because so much communication goes through some kind of media channel, and that has so many downsides, but it also has upsides, and I wanna share that, and I wanna hear more thoughts about that, and wanna motivate people to think about that stuff more. I think that's mainly what I really wanna do, and it is motivated by what I studied, like academically and also like practically now. I did a bunch of stuff. I made podcasts. I like making music at times, and I just have fun creating things. I think that's one of the most fulfilling things I can do, at least, like to me. And that's really nice. And I want to like think about that and share more about that area, because I think we experience it a lot, but we don't talk a lot about it. Again, depending on who you are. But yeah. And I think that does it, actually. Like, I really tried to keep it short, because I recorded 2 other outros and they were both far too long. Yeah, so that was the first Media Max mark. Media Makes a Mark video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope I will do more. I also hope it's gonna be. I'm pretty certain the next one is not gonna be about AI, but AI is gonna come up again because I do think it's like an interesting it's an interesting development, but I think most things are not gonna completely change, but they're gonna do more, and there's more stuff. As I said before, I think a lot of problems that AI seems to have are maybe a lot of times also just problems that are amplified because AI makes more of it, and it amplifies things. Like it's an amplifier for stuff that the internet already does and has had, and problems it has had and stuff like that. So yeah, I hope the next one is not gonna be AI related, because I kinda am sick of it at this point. I really want a break from that. But yeah, thanks, and maybe see you again. I don't know. Bye.